Wish you a wonderful World Poetic Day. We have been brought up with poetry since our childhood days. And what exactly poetry is? Is it simply the playful coexistence of words and silence? Is it only something that the poet writes and the reader reads? What do you say? From my experience of more than 50 years, my association with poetry, I feel that poetry is something that is beyond words and silence. Poetry is something that gives us the urge to live life more poetically and more lively. Who is a poet? Let me recite a poem by Tadeusz Rózewicz from Poland. The title of his poem is Who is a Poet? A poet is one who writes verse and one who doesn't write verse. A poet is one who throws off fetters and one who puts fetters on himself. A poet is one who believes and one who cannot bring himself to believe. A poet is one who has told lies and one who has been told lies. A poet is one who has been inclined to fall and one who raises himself. A poet is one who tries to live and one who cannot live. I have translated this poem into Odia and let me present it for you. Kabi kiye, kabi siye jiye kavita lekhe ebong jiye kavita lekhe nahi. Kabi siye jiye shrunkhalaru mukuli ase ebong jiye shrunkhalare bandhe nijoku. Kabi siye jiye বিশ্বাস करे ଏବଂ ଯିଏ ନିଜକୁ ମନେଇ ପାରେ ନାହିଁ ବିଶ୍ୱାସ କରିବାକୁ। କବି ସିଏ ଯିଏ ମିଛ କହିଥାଏ ଏବଂ ଯାହାକୁ ମିଛ କୁହାଯାଇଥାଏ। କବି ସିଏ ଯିଏ ବାରବାର ପଢ଼ୁଥାଏ ଏବଂ ଯିଏ ନିଜକୁ ଉଠାଉଥାଏ। କବି ସିଏ ଯିଏ ପ୍ରସ୍ଥାନ ପାଇଁ ଚେଷ୍ଟା କରୁଥାଏ ଏବଂ ଯିଏ ପ୍ରସ୍ଥାନ କରିପାରେ ନାହିଁ। You can see how beautifully Rózewicz has described a poet. So every one of us has a bit of poet within us. And some people nurture the poet within and write poetry. Some people doesn't write poetry but love poetry and love to read poetry, live poetry. The joy of writing poetry and the joy of reading poetry is exclusive to a poetic self which every one of us try to develop. One more thing I would like to tell you about poetry. Poetry is not simply the words or the verse that we read. Poetry is there everywhere, though it is a form of expression, literary expression. Even in prose also you can find poetry. Even if you read novels, short stories, the core of all these forms is a poetic theme. It's not exactly theme, you can call it that the soul of all expressions is highly poetic. For instance, if you look at the sky and you see a rainbow, you can see poetry in the sky. Can you say that the rainbow is the poetry written by the sky? It is almost like that. One more thing is, whether you write poetry or not, poetry has to be our way of life because it enriches our sensibility. It makes us live with life more vigorously and at the same time more beautifully. What is the aesthetic expression of life that we find in poetry is great. I would like to end with another poem by a Brazilian poet, and that he is Carlos Drummond Andrade. The title of his poem is Poetry. He says, I spent 1 hour thinking of a verse. My pen does not want to write. Yet it is here inside, restless, alive. It is here inside and does not wish to get out. But the poetry of this very moment overflows my whole life. See the last line. The poetry of this very moment overflows my whole life. I have translated this poem also into Odia. Let me share it with you. The title is Kavita. পদটিয়ে ভাবি ভাবি ঘণ্টাଏ ବିତାଇ ଦେଲି ସିନା କଲମ ମୋର ଚାହୁଁନାହିଁ ତାକୁ ଲେଖିବାକୁ ଅଛି ମୋ ଭିତରେ ତାହା ତଥାପି ଅସ୍ଥିର ଜୀବନ୍ତ ଏଇ ଭିତରେ ହିଁ ଅଛି ଜମା ଚାହୁଁନାହିଁ ଆସିବାକୁ କିନ୍ତୁ ଠିକ୍ ଏଇ ମୁହୂର୍ତ୍ତର କବିତାଟି ଉଛୁଳି ଯାଉଛି ମୋର ସାରା ଜୀବନ ଏଇ ମୁହୂର୍ତ୍ତର କବିତାଟି ଉଛୁଳି ଯାଉଛି ମୋର ସାରା ଜୀବନ See how poetry overflows our whole life. At the end, I will say, let's celebrate our life, let's celebrate poetry, let us celebrate our life poetically. Let's have a wonderful World Poetry Day. Thank you.